catch for the hearts that sustain us. Bringing the love where the waves crash and scatter. Words form a bond and they endlessly chain us. Kindness that matters. Voices arise and the flow never falter. Building a space where the ties last forever. Chat is the place where respect doesn't alter, holding us clever. Grateful are we for the sparks that ignite us. Chat lifts us up, every voice brings its power. Threads of goodwill through the storms that unite us. Hope we devour. Here in this space, every heart finds its meaning. Words weave a net where the world feels much kinder. Chat is the pulse, every moment redeeming, binding reminder. Grateful are we for the sparks that ignite us. Chat lifts us up, every voice brings its power. Threads of goodwill through the storms that unite us. Hope we devour. Quiet nights and the storms full of thunder.
I guess distraction is the name of the game tonight. First, I get distracted in the 5 minutes leading up to the stream starting, and so I'm late. And then I get distracted trying to get all my windows set up properly for y'all while the song is running. And we exceed the time count. I am the distracted queen apparently today. Hey, Cricket. Thank you, Scooter Mom. Thanks to Cricket for the theme song. Cricket did that work. Scooter Mom, you are first. You are first in. So let me pull up. Scooter Mom, what colors do you like? Hey, Kristen, how are you? It's a fascinating book, isn't it, Kristen? It is, I go back to one of the original statements in the book, the guy who was a Scientologist who got kicked out because he wanted to make an actual representation. Maybe it wasn't this book, but there was a guy, I can't remember who it was, who was high up in Scientology and started researching Hubbard's life before Scientology. And found out that most of what was in the history was a lie. And so he advocated that Hubbard's real history should be told. And the church didn't like that at all and fought back and this guy was declared a suppressive person. But reading this book about Hubbard, what's more fascinating, you're all about the jewel tones. Okay. So here we go. Let's see. You like gold or silver, Scooter Mom? Okay, Lance, you can check it out. Have at it. It's really important to do your research and make sure that you look at sources that are critical of Scientology, as well as official Scientology sources. Scientology will tell you not to do that, but anyone ethical will always tell you to look and consider if there's bad reviews about something. Restaurants will encourage you. Okay. Scooter Mom, here is the First In Award. Restaurants will tell you, check to make sure there aren't any bad reviews against us. Salespeople, resume writers, you should always look at the critical. The critics as well as the people who are behind it. You need to get a full picture. Look at all of the background. I'm glad you like it, Scooter Mom. I like the tie-dye effect. It is very Dusty-esque. Very Dusty-esque. Cricket, can you email that to her? So reading, hold on. Thinking that it looked like Dusty? Yeah, it does. It does look like Dusty. Cricket, did you mean to channel Dusty with the background? Because it does look a lot like Dusty. It hadn't, I mean, we opened chapter 13 talking about the founding of the Church of Scientology in 1953. He does have shirts for sale. He does have shirts for sale. You were thinking of Dusty? That's nice, Cricket. Miss Sunrise Dawn, we are totally okay, honey. You go take care of what you need to take care of. I don't think there's anything urgent. So it hadn't ever occurred to me that religion was booming in post-war America. No, Joe, it's not. Does it look like a Super Bowl stream, dear? I mean, the title should make that clear. Not that you're not welcome, honey, but it just seems like a unexpected question. We have an unexpected visitor, y'all. He is on his way. Come here. No, you don't need that. Yeah. There he is. There's that soda cat, y'all. You're going to get cat butt here in just a minute. Thank you, Cricket. Thank you very much. If I don't do it in the middle of the stream, then I can tend to forget. That's soda licking the microphone, y'all. Trying to get him to look at you guys. And I'm also trying to make it so you can hear him purring. Yeah, that's what I was trying to do. Get up in his neck so you can hear his purr. Okay, so soda's going to be sitting here for a minute or two, y'all. Hopefully that's giving you enough of the purring. Now I've got to find where he situated my mouse. Yes, absolutely send Scooter Mom clips from smaller channels. So I didn't realize that religion was booming in post-war America, but it makes sense when he talked about Eisenhower and under God to the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, Joe, you can think that. So the growth and the outgrowth of religious fervor in the early 50s is part of why the author suggests that L. Ron created it into a religion, although we already know that L. Ron had already been talking about the way to make, or there's reports that he had said the way to make real money was to make a religion. So, you know, we don't get a whole lot. It talks about L. Ron sending information to the FBI and continuing to send information to the FBI. it talks about how the FBI thinks that he's not quite all possessing of his faculties. But he also very early on, sorry, putting something away before Soda drops it on the ground with his tail, because I don't know if you can see that ear. He is right here on the desk in front of me. Dinner time for them was 15 minutes ago, and I failed to feed you before I sat down for the live. So Soda has come in to announce his presence and insist that he be fed. So he will sit here until he's fed. So Hubbard early on was skirmishing with the FBI, but trying to really make his hold tight on Scientology, and his use of the legal system as an attack dog and a delaying tactic has served him well up till now. And he says, you know, the law can be used very easily to harass, and enough harassment on somebody who is simply on the thin edge anyway, well knowing that he is not authorized, will generally be sufficient to cause his professional decease, he wrote in one of his interminable bulletins, casually added, if possible, of course, ruin him utterly. And that was the advice he gave to anyone he deemed apostate. Yeah, Cricket, we're going to get there. We're going to get there, that's for sure. It's going to be, at the rate we're going, I think it's going to take a while. But you would think the FBI would have thought something about that. I'm not sure what the deal is with their inability to take them down. So this advice that I just said is what he gave, he suggested be done to what he deemed apostates or squirrels. He recommended, quote, merciless litigation. Merciless litigation. This is a tactic that is not uncommon. Merciless litigation. So it goes on. In the same bulletin, he offered the benefit of his advice to any Scientologists unlucky enough to be arrested. They were to instantly file a $100,000 civil damages suit for molestation of a man of God going about his business, and then go on the offensive forcefully, artfully, and arduously, and cause blue flames to dance on the courthouse roof until everyone has apologized profusely. Now, $100,000 in 1952 that's $1 million lawsuit, y'all. That's $1 million lawsuit he was suggesting being filed. So file $1 million lawsuit for civil damages. And he goes on, the only way to defend anything is to attack. If you ever forget that, you will lose every battle you are ever engaged in. So, always attack, never defend. Always attack, never defend. So does knocking things over on my desk without regard. Hold on a second. I need to get back to where I was. Okay, now I'm back to where I was. You guys are being very patient with me. It's a lot of references to temper tantrums. A lot of references to temper tantrums. Anything you guys thought was interesting in chapter 13? I found this interesting. Yes, Scooter Mom. Yes, brain fog. He did see an ear. I did forget to feed him. It is my absolute punishment. You are not at all wrong. Not at all wrong. I concur. I painted 2 new rocks, you guys. You want to see? So here's the first one. I think I'm happy with it. It was fun to make. And here's the second one. Which I kind of like too. I realized I haven't been doing many rocks lately, so I've been trying to do a little more with that. I may need to go get the dog. So, yeah, brain fog. Thank you, brain fog. Thank you, Cricket. Thank you, guys. My artistic assurance is very low. My artistic self-assurance is not, believe it or not, my artistic self-assurance is not very high at all. And so I never, whether I have to put it away. It was a really good idea. Oh, I did another new one. I forgot 2 other new ones. I have to put it away and come back to it a lot of the time, because when I do that, when I put it away and come back to it, I'm generally happier with it. So that one, I think, came out really nicely. Really nicely. And then I think I showed you guys this one. Yeah, I showed you that one. So I'm trying to put a little bit of art in my life. Scooter Mom, when you said I forgot to feed him, Thank you. Scooter Mom, I said, I thought when you were saying I forgot to feed him, you were talking about a troll, that I forgot to feed a troll. So I was very confused for a minute, and then I realized you were talking about soda. It was an interesting point where Hubbard is trying to find ways to attract new people into Scientology, and he posted a classified that said, "We'll talk to anybody about anything. Never feed trolls." Yeah. And they got an unbelievable response, which is in some ways just so incredibly sad, y'all. I mean, think about it. They posted just a small advertisement in the evening newspaper with a phone number and the offer, "I will talk to anyone about anything." And they got no end of responses. And I suppose that deep well of loneliness is always there. Maybe it just hadn't, it just sounds so sad that people are so sad. And I was thinking for a moment that it was specific to this point in time, but it's probably true that that sort of loneliness exists all over the world. So that campaign was successful. So Hubbard tried to uh, refine it and target more better. Um, so he came up with the idea of targeting polio victims. And then he suggested that auditors looking for pre-clears. Yeah, Kristen, wasn't that interesting? Calling themselves Reverend. Yeah, like they were trying to create a certain image. They were playing it, well, all of it is clothing themselves in the appearance of propriety, all of while suggesting that propriety was the problem, right? Very weird. So ambitious auditors looking for new pre-clears should cut stories in the newspapers about people who have been victimized one way or the other by life. It does not much matter whether that victimizing is in the matter of mental or physical energy or injury. Then the auditors should make a call on the bereaved or injured person as speedily as possible. And here it is, Kristen, representing themselves as a minister whose compassion was compelled by the newspaper story. Yeah, stolen valor indeed, Cricket. So they go even further, right? They start wearing clerical collars, they call themselves Reverend, and then what does Hubbard suggest? Reading the newspapers, finding stories of people who have been injured, presenting themselves, hunting down that person, making a call on them, and then representing themselves as a minister whose compassion was compelled by a news story, by the newspaper story. So it's just such a vicious way of attacking kind well, not I don't know if these people who were victimized were kind, but attacking people who are already down is a more appropriate way of saying it. And here, we've got another thing that we've seen before. L. Ron Hubbard purported he only made $125 a week because he was so rich. But he also was earning commissions from the sale of training processes and e-meters and all the royalties from his books. And not only that, but every time he reprinted the book, every time he made revisions to it and reprinted it, he made everybody buy the newest one. So you couldn't have an old copy. I mean, you could have an old copy, but you had to have the new copy. And you had to pay for the new copy. And so that's an encouragement to make revisions on purpose, right? So a new one, it says, was appearing every 2 months, usually containing new processes and procedures superseding those currently in use, right? And then the Church of Scientology gave Hubbard a proportional pay plan. So rather than a salary, L. Ron received a percentage of the church's gross income. So that means before the end of the 50s, L. Ron was making $250,000 a year, which is a lot of money. Let's see how much it is. He was making $2.8 million a year, y'all. He was making $2.8 million a year. I wonder what percentage of the church's income that was. $250,000 a year translates to $2.8 million a year now. So 250,000. I mean, would the church give him 25% of its income? How much was it making? $2 million a year? Yeah. Yeah, that converts $250,000 converts to $2.8 million a year. Unbelievable. So then still in 57, Hubbard publishes a book that says radiation. He solved the radiation problem. It's a mental problem. It's not a physical problem. And furthermore, he's devised a vitamin compound called dianazine that runs out radiation, or what appears to be radiation. It also turns on and runs out incipient cancer. Uh, uh, this is a wackadoodle story. A man who didn't have much liability to skin cancer, only had a few moles, took dianazine. His whole jaw turned into a raw mass of cancer. He kept on taking dianazine and it disappeared after a while. I was looking at a case of cancer that might have happened. So, yeah. And literally, your whole jaw turns into a raw mass of cancer and you don't go to the doctor? And he kept taking it and it just disappeared? That is the wildest story. Like, just wild. His whole jaw turned into a mass of cancer. But the FDA was not at all happy about this. And they swooped in and took all of the dianazine and destroyed it because it was labeled as a preventative treatment for radiation sickness. Insanity. And then he introduced a christening ceremony to the church. Ceremonies of the founding Church of Scientology. And he did a christening ceremony. Its function was to simply help get the Thetan oriented in its new body. And then finally, the CIA opened a file. And they had a difficult time tracing all of the threads. It goes on to discuss the CIA's interest. It's really a time-based autobiography. So we're just going through things chronologically. It's talking about the Freedom Congress lectures and calls out, hey, Lori, calls out one of the most interesting things that Hubbard said about himself is it appeared that the commander used to tell Ron, if it's not true for you, Commander Thompson, if it's not true for you, it's not true. It aligned with his own personal philosophy, Hubbard explained, because if there is anyone in the world calculated to believe what he wants to believe, it is I. So Hubbard himself says, because if there is anyone in the world calculated to believe what he wants to believe, it is me. It's just a very interesting. Lots of past lives that apparently sound like Flash Gordon. Commentary that none of the past lives ever seemed to be Attila the Hun, Genghis Khan, or Pontius Pilate, which I found quite amusing. And then a little vignette about how Elron stiffed his friends for the rent and the grocers for the grocery bill, and then bought St. Hill. So the summer, the let's see, the spring, fall of 57 or 58, fall of 58. He bought St. Hill in England. And the next chapter. Did you get a lot of snow, Scooter Mom? Lori, how's the weather for you? Talks a lot about Elrond trying to make nice in the town, and again, all of his crazy ideas. He's gonna back to radiation sickness. Just nuts. It's very interesting. It says here, you refuse to look. Oh no, Scooter Mom. It says the Church of Scientology commissioned a bust by Edward Harris. And Harris liked his sitters to talk while he was working and asked his friend to attend the sittings and chat with Hubbard. And her first impression of Hubbard was that he looked like a fat, scrubbed pig, which is an interesting observation. Yes, Kristen. Yes. Yes. Yes, Kristen. Fat, pink, scrubbed pig. One of the first things Hubbard told her was that you could hear a tomato scream if you cut it, and that's why he never ate tomatoes. He talked a lot about whether vegetables could feel pain and about all his past lives. It was very entertaining. It was obvious he had a good mind and was most widely read. After the bust was finished, we were invited to dinner with him and his wife at St. Hill. When we arrived, we were met by Mary Sue. She was rather drab, mousy, and nothing short of a person quite a bit. Oh, she was rather drab, mousy. She was a rather drab, mousy, nothing sort of person, quite a bit younger than him. She showed us into a book-lined study, and he waited a few minutes, rather theatrically, before making an entrance. I don't think they had finished work on the house because we had dinner in the kitchen. It was all white tiled, very antiseptic, and the meal was served by a woman wearing a white overall, white shoes, and stockings. There was nothing to drink but Coca-Cola or water, and the food was awful. We had frozen plaice fillets, a few vegetables, and ice cream, but he had an enormous stake overhanging his plate. It was obvious that everything revolved around him. And then she says when she and the sculptor left, they were so hungry they went to the buffet. These little vignettes we get of Hubbard by people outside the group, I found really interesting. Sometimes I wonder if he was just after money and all the ego was incidental in terms of his motivation. I don't know. I think, okay, Laurie, I don't know. I think you have to have a lot of ego to pull off what he's doing. I think I think if he didn't believe it, it doesn't matter if he didn't believe it because he lived it. I know there's a lot of people who are like, did he really buy his own cock and bull story? But he created, that's part of what the Mutants and Mystics book was talking about, I think. He created the mythology around him. It's like I said, if I don't believe it, it's not true for me. If it's not true, like if I don't believe it, it's not true for me. That's what he did. He just decided to believe, and I can't see how I can't see how if he didn't believe it, how he couldn't how he could maintain that and not believe it. Like what is you don't get to live in reality anymore when you've okay, Kristen, that's good to know. You don't get to live in reality anymore when you've created this unreal environment that everybody around you supports, right? Isn't that why interventions of some sort can be good, Kristen? Because you have to break through the bubble that people have put around themselves, and that bubble is supported by the people they put in their lives, for good or for ill. He's certainly got some sort of pathology going on. And then he tries some community service in the community. And then he decides he's going to dabble in politics and becomes convinced that Scientology could help Labor win the next election in Australia, creating a favorable climate for the development of the church and neutralizing the hostility of the media. That was a quote. And then we get to the part where his son Nibs blows. And there's 2, 3 there's 3 paragraphs. In the book, there's 3 paragraphs about it. It's very tricky. You have to spend a long time building rapport so a person like that trusts you enough to accept feedback about themselves without just saying "F you" forever. Right. I can imagine, Kristen. And how do you do that with somebody? I mean, I don't know how anybody would do that with somebody as desperately ill as Hubbard appeared to be. I mean, very desperately ill, in my opinion, which is not an excuse for behavior. Um, someday, someday we'll have better mental health treatment for issues like this. So his son left because he couldn't make any money. And Hubbard had no sympathy for that. Um, Not that it appears Hubbard had much sympathy for much. Um, yeah, Kristen. And his son, Nibs, wanted to continue practicing Scientology. He was trying to do right by his father, but his father wouldn't brook anything but 100% loyalty to the organization, even to his own son's detriment, which is just really sad. And then his mom dies, and his aunt, bless her heart, bullies him into coming home before his mother dies. Not that that makes any difference at all. He just apparently, we find out in later chapters, he tells his mother it's okay to drop her body while she's unconscious. That's reportedly what he did during his trip. Um, he didn't stay for the funeral. That's a little better. He paid for everything, but he didn't stay for the funeral. He hadn't had any contact with his family since the end of the war. And it was I just his poor family. His poor family. This is the child that they doted on. So he flew home to see his mother before she died. and reportedly told her that it was okay for her to drop her body, which we'll get to, I think, in the next chapter. So that was 59. And then finally in 60, Grinstead got an idea of what was actually going on with Hubbard. Yeah, there is Cricket. There is a part in here. Let me, just a second, let me make a note here. There is a part here. I'm hoping I highlighted it. Let me find it. I'm looking for this passage where he was talking to another woman and spent an awful long time talking to her about how women had victimized him, how he hadn't ever been married to Sarah, that was a lie, and that he had taken precautions to make sure that Mary Sue could never, ever take advantage of him the way other women had taken advantage of him. Um, yep, here it is. In chapter 16, he talked a lot about Sarah Northrop and seemed to want to make sure that I knew he had never married her. I didn't know why it was so important to him. I'd never met Sarah and I couldn't have cared less, but he wanted to persuade me that the marriage had never taken place. When he talked about his first wife, the picture he put out of himself was of this poor wounded fellow coming home from the war and being abandoned by his wife and family because he would be a drain on them. He said he had planned every move along the way with Mary Sue to avoid being victimized again. So yes, Cricket and Kristen, I concur. He didn't care about women except to use them. I completely concur. So the next marking that I've got down that I found interesting is how quickly this weird ass e-meter piece of technology became the diviner of truth, right? So this is 1960. I don't think so, Kristen. I don't get the impression that he cared about anybody. I really don't. Um I don't get that impression at all. Nothing nothing in the book so far has given me the idea that he cared for any singular individual. First Minnesota goodbye, y'all. First Minnesota goodbye. I know it's from the beginning of the book, but the most redeeming thing I ever read about him was helping to feed his little preemie son with a dropper. Like, at least briefly, he seemed to sort of care. That's interesting. I don't remember reading that, but that's pretty amazing if he did that, Kristen. Yeah. I mean, hey, Fab Daddy, how are you doing, man? There is a comment, I think, in chapter 13 talking about how Hubbard could seem to be the most empathetic person in the room. Um, how caring it was an example of how caring he was with a training auditor who felt that she wasn't really being helpful. And the person who was reporting this said that Hubbard was quite kind in the way he treated her. How was the hot tub, Fab Daddy? What's the weather outside for you, man? So but it's not clear if those are masking in order to manipulate or um or what's going on there. I mean, I did watch this really good video on sociopathy earlier today. And one of the things she talks about is masking in order to manipulate. I thought it was really fascinating in the context. Filthy. The weather's filthy? I am sorry, man. I hope it was nice in the hot tub. So it was this video. This is an insider video of a woman who is diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, who is also, I feel like I've got lipstick on my teeth, who is also a clinical psychologist. And so I think she's got really interesting insights to what sociopathy actually looks like. Did you really, Kristen? Wasn't it fascinating? I thought it was fascinating. One of the things I found really fascinating about it was this feeling in her of a need to act out. And it sounded yeah, they must match up. It reminded me a little bit of this story of L. Ron Hubbard having these intermittent moments where he's kind, interspersed with this acting out tantrum kind of behavior. And the anxiety that she said she was experiencing, yeah, the anxiety she said she was experiencing that led to her behavior of acting out, um, and how really difficult that sort of cycle must be for someone who's living it. Um, and I think she's really right that until we really have a good understanding, we can't hope to learn how to treat it or help, right? And the strange attraction she talks about that we have to sociopaths. Yes, he could dial the charm up to 11 when he wanted or needed to. Exactly. Um, it the behaviors she talks about just resonated very deeply with the way L. Ron Hubbard's behavior seems to cycle in the book, right? Like, and certainly there's probably other diagnoses. Hey, Antics, how are you? Certainly there's probably other diagnoses, um, because those, there's some manic, at least to me. You're much more qualified than I am, Kristen, but it looks like there's some uh, bipolar issues going on. Mania and depression, right? So the thing I thought that was so interesting, to go back to this technology, no one in it says no one in Scientology now doubted the capability of the e-meter to expose visceral emotions, and ever more elaborate sect checks would become a common feature of life in the Scientology movement. Evidence of Hubbard's persistent paranoia about his enemies, both those that existed in reality and those that thronged his imagination. Lori, take care. It was good to see you. I miss your face. You must be really busy. I hope you have a wonderful and lovely rest of your evening. You've always thought there's some bipolar going on as well, Kristen? Yeah, yeah. So no one doubted the capability of the e-meter to expose people. So now the e-meter becomes a lie detector. It's not really technology. It's just lie detector. Um, the FBI interviewed Polly, his first wife, and Polly could say very little except that her first husband was a genius with a misdirected mind, which is really, really sad. Really, really sad. She said very little except that her first husband was a genius with a misdirected mind. He continues his meddling in politics, and in April of 1960, he issued a bulletin to all the Scientologist franchise holders in the US, asking them to do everything in their power to deny the presidency to Nixon. He said Nixon believed in nothing the Church of Scientology stood for. And then he said, here's meddling religion and politics, assuming that Scientology is a religion. We want clean hands in public office in the United States. Let's begin by doggedly denying Nixon the presidency, no matter what his Secret Service tries to do to us now. He hates us and has used what police force was available to him to say so. So please get busy on him. The part about him helping care for Nibs was chapter 4. You were mistaken. It says Polly fed him, but Ron did take turns watching over him. I think it's amazing that his children, I think it's amazing that his children still came to him and wanted a relationship with him. I'm not, and got involved with Scientology, and is just very sad. So Nixon wasn't elected president, but L. Ron Hubbard was becoming more and more interested in political and international affairs. So again, he says Scientologists should exert influence. Don't bother to get elected, he said. Get a job on the secretarial staff or the bodyguard. In this way, positioned close to the seat of power, Scientology would be advantageously situated to transform an organization. If we were revolutionaries, he added, this bulletin would be a very dangerous document. So all of this is going on, and you have to consider how much all of his conspiracy theories resonates with other conspiracy theories we see even in today's world, right? He's saying, don't bother to get elected, get a job on the secretarial staff or the bodyguard. In this way, close to the seat of power, Scientology will be advantageously situated to transform an organization. So now we've got people afraid of civil servants because they might be being taken over. They might be doing the taking over of the government. We've got the same narrative going on. The government has been taken over from the inside, and so we have to cleanse it. This is, it's an inverse of the same narrative. So the goal of, they created a Scientology department. the goal of which was to bring government and hostile philosophies or societies into a state of complete compliance with the goals of Scientology. This is done by high-level ability to control and its absence by a low-level ability to overwhelm. Introvert and control agencies that don't agree and are not in complete compliance with the goals. Through controlling or through overwhelm. Subvert, introvert, and control. These are Hubbard's words. This is the playbook. And he wrote it down for people to read and distribute. Sort of manically, huh, Kristen? Always find, if attacked on some vulnerable point by anyone or anything or any organization, always find or manufacture enough threat against them to cause them to sue for peace. Don't ever defend, always attack. Don't ever do nothing. Unexpected attacks in the rear of the enemy's front ranks works best. This is other advice that I see. Always find or manufacture enough threat to cause them to sue for peace. Don't ever defend, always attack. Don't ever do nothing. Unexpected attacks in the rear of the enemy's front ranks work best. This resonates very deeply, y'all. So Hubbard laid it out, he wrote it out, he created pages upon pages of policy, producing, it said, sheaves of documents that appeared to have been drafted by committees of bureaucrats and lawyers. It says, laid out and printed like official government papers, they conferred dry authority on content which not have withstood too close of scrutiny. But of course, no Scientologist would question the little, doesn't it, Kristen? It very much sounds Machiavellian. Of course, no Scientologist would question the literal truth of anything Hubbard wrote, no matter how improbable. If Ron said it was so, it was so. So I'm going back to Department of Government Affairs. Goal is to bring government and hostile philosophies or societies into a state of complete compliance. Complete compliance with the goals of Scientology. Complete compliance is a little excessive, y'all. So then he's announcing new training courses, the new St. Hill training special briefing course for £250 per person. Hold on. Oh. So 100 pounds in 1960 is worth $3,000. 3,000 pounds. So it's worth about 6,000 pounds. So that's $7,500, you guys. Yeah, he does, Cricket. So that's $7,500. The new Saint Hill briefing course for $250 is $7,500. I'm just and Mary Sue advertises it by saying, I want you to make money. If any one of you cannot conceive of an auditor driving around in a gold plated Cadillac or Rolls, you had better reorientate yourselves. I like the idea, says Mary Sue. I think Mary Sue was just as ill as L. Ron Hubbard was. I think she was. So then Ron starts building all over St. Hill and gets in trouble with the zoning commission. Mentions how Scientologists, every time there's a technical update, which it happens all the time. Let's see, it says the briefing course would eventually comprise more than 300 taped lectures by L. Ron Hubbard, its longevity sustained by technical breakthroughs that followed closely one upon the other, each new technique replacing the last and requiring dedicated Scientologists to trek back to St. Hill time and time again in order to keep up to date. It just, he posted a memo on how to wash cars. He posted a memo on how to care for flowers. He obsessive compulsive comes to mind. In 1961, security checks increased with a more intrusive questionnaire that appears to have been designed with perverts and criminals rather than potential troublemakers in mind. Many of the questions reflected Hubbard's morbid preoccupation with sexual deviation. Have you ever had intercourse with a member of your family? Have you ever had anything to do with the baby farm? These are weird questions, y'all. Wide-ranging crimes. If you've ever had any unkind thoughts about Hubbard or Mary Sue. And then it discusses the comprehensive dossier that Scientology is developing on every single participant. They're building this dossier. But remember, if we go back a little bit, he said, remember, I've quoted this half a dozen times. So people are giving him, answering these most innermost questions to a person who said, and I quote, always find or manufacture enough threat against them to cause them to sue for peace. Always find or manufacture enough threat against them to cause them to sue for peace. So he's told people, if there's anything you guys, I mean, when people tell you who they are, believe them. He's collecting all of this information on people. He's already made it clear how people who leave are to be treated. And people aren't putting the two and two together, that he's going to use this information that he's gathered through sec checks against them. And it's, I don't know, am I mistaken, guys? Is it not pretty clear? So they have a comprehensive dossier on all the Scientologists. And that later on, the government of Australia brings that up, I think in chapter 13. Chapter 15. We're not going to get through all the chapters, guys. What else, since we have passed Second Minnesota goodbye, and we are only on chapter 14, this point they probably either didn't believe it would happen to them or were in too deep. Yes, Scooter Mom. So then how do you build a bridge? How do you build a bridge? That is the question, and it's always the question, right? How do we build a bridge to Scientologists? How do we build a bridge in this fractured political climate to the other side? Whichever side you're on, how do you build a bridge? How do we reconnect? How do we reconnect? That is what is important. Reconnecting. So early 60s is when Hubbard quits courting the newspapers. And East Grinstead is like, okay, whatever you're doing, you keep to yourself and we'll keep to ourselves. He He wrote a letter to Kennedy in 62 to advise Kennedy that Scientology techniques were peculiarly applicable to spaceflight, and that the perception of an astronaut could be increased far beyond human range and stamina to levels hitherto unattained in human beings. And he expected a huge response. He said each man would need processing for 250 hours at $25 an hour. $25 an hour. So $250 So $250 per hour. Yeah, $2,500 per hour at 250 hours. $2,500 times 250. He wanted $625,000 per astronaut to train them. Just an ungodly amount of money. And that he was only going to take cash. So he did all kinds of preparations for this, y'all. All kinds of preparations. And then the FDA raided him, and it was poorly done. And L. Ron was able to issue a statement that said, all I can make of this is that the United States government has launched an attack upon religion and is seizing and burning books of philosophy. Where will this end? Complete censorship? A complete ignoring of the First Amendment? Are churches to be attacked and books burned as a normal course of action? Attack. Always attack. Never defend. He went full on the attack. That's his only response. Only response. And then for some reason, he declares a general amnesty on all his followers for anything done before 1963. And it's not clear. It's not clear why he did that. It just says that he did it. So I'd be curious why for his 52nd birthday, he bestowed a general amnesty. And he did it again later. It's just very strange. He talks about visiting heaven. The book says his visits to heaven would become something an embarrassment in the future. But even though they tried to pass it off as allegory, you're not behind, Scooter Mom. I said the book was through 13 through 16, and we're going slow. So I need to skip over stuff. I said 13 through 16. Australia investigates Scientology. He tells them he's independently wealthy and draws only a token salary of $70 a week. So conditions start being assigned in 65. Ethics becomes a thing in 1965. Cyril Vosper, who is someone who worked on the staff at St. Hill, said, what happened with the development of ethics was that zeal expanded at the expense of tolerance and sanity. And that sounds apt. My feeling, this I found interesting, and I'm not sure if it's misogynist or real. He says, my feeling was that Mary Sue devised a lot of the really degrading aspects of ethics. I always had a great warmth and admiration for Ron. He was a remarkable individual, a constant source of new information and ideas. But I thought Mary Sue was an exceedingly nasty person. She was a biatch. So it wasn't clear to me if that's just misogyny or if Mary Sue was the hand behind the man, right? The Australian board really had a lot of things to say about Scientology. It said Scientology processes tended to produce subservience, amounting almost to mental enslavement. Because of fear, delusion, and debilitation, the individual often found it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to escape. Furthermore, the potentiality for the misuse of confidence was great, and the existence of files containing the most intimate secrets and confessions of thousands of individuals was a constant threat to them and a matter of grave concern. I mean, they had a ton to say, and it was 173 pages. The problem, apparently, is that it branded all its followers as evil, and that was not helpful. So what happened was a reaction in the culture where the former conception of the movement as a relatively harmless, if cranky, health and self-improvement cult was transformed into one which portrayed it as evil, dangerous, a form of hypnosis with all of the overtones of Svengali and brainwashing. So the Australian government acted in 65, and Scientology responded by telling investigators to find at least one bad mark on every psychiatrist in Britain. But the detective ran to the news and sold his story to a Sunday newspaper, creating even more bad press for Scientology. Pretty amazing. And Scientology hit back basically by calling the Australians unable to create a report like that because they were the foundation of Australian society is the riffraff of London's slums, he said. The robbers, murderers, prostitutes, fences, thieves, the scourings of Newgate and Bedlam. So the niceties of truth and fairness, of hearing witnesses and weighing evidence, are not for men whose ancestry is lost in the promiscuity of the prison ships of transportation. So that was what Hubbard had to say back to the Australians. It's just nuts. Just nuts. And then we get the first clear. Surprise, surprise. We get the first clear in 1966. So we get the first clear finally. And the first clear seems to have been forgotten. Seems to have been forgotten. And to proclaim the occasion of the new first clear, Hubbard proclaimed yet another general amnesty. Yeah, Cricket, they had not one good thing to say. And Hubbard came back, guns blazing. It was something else. It was something else. 3rd Minnesota goodbye, y'all. How are we coming? You want to try and see if we can get through? We are partway through chapter 15. Chapter 15 ends with the beginnings of the development of the Sea Org, because it becomes Hubbard's deal becomes that he's being persecuted from all sides. And so he needs someplace to go where there is no government. And the only place that is on the open sea. So he decides to create the Sea Org. But to back up a little, Hubbard declared another general amnesty to celebrate the clear. And he also made a statement that he was renouncing his PhD. And East Grinstead pointed out that the publicly renounced title was already bogus. So I thought that was a funny little passage. There's a whole section on his racism. He spent a lot of time in Rhodesia until Rhodesia kicked his tushy to the curb. And it was his experience in Rhodesia that I think really created this need in him for the Sea Org. You guys are quiet today. Am I going too much in the book and not chit-chatting with y'all enough? Tell me, what did you think about these 4 chapters? I thought it was interesting hearing about the beginnings of the Sea Org and how just lucky this man seems to be. It's like out of craziness, he creates something. The skill he has with his charm is just unreal. Unreal. So East Grinstead gets upset also because there's a feeling that the Scientologists were trying to take over. So there were doctors who were Scientologists, there was a real estate agent, there was a dentist, there was jewelers. It was like all of a sudden everybody in the community was a Scientologist. Um so in 66 is when Hubbard really came up with the idea. He says, yeah. So chapter 16 is essentially the beginning of the Sea Org. And it starts in 1957 when he's 56 years old, the father of 7 children and a grandfather. So he raised a private navy, appointed himself Commodore, and pursued by the CIA, the FBI, and the international press, and a miscellany of suspicious government and maritime officials, he launched he resigned from the Church of Scientology. Hubbard said the church owed him $13 million. $13 million in 1966. Okay, let's figure that one out. So he said the church owed him $13 million, which would translate into $125,000. No, $125 million. Is that better? $125 million. $13 million in 1966 is worth $125 million today. That's how much. The church was sufficiently well established to survive without his leadership. But in preparation for his anticipated resignation, a special committee had been set up to investigate how much the church owed its founder. It was decided, yeah, Husby said in the distance, y'all, that I did that in the wrong direction. In preparation for his anticipated resignation, a special committee had been set up to investigate how much the church owed its founder. It was decided the figure was around 13 million, but Hubbard, in his benevolence, forgave the debt. Hubbard forgave the debt of $125 million. The church was sufficiently well established to survive without him. How could they have afforded $13 million? It's not possible. That was interesting, y'all. You want me to do that some more? You want to see my green screen? We won't do that anymore. Then it says he's still a member of the Explorers Club, so he applies for permission to fly the Explorers Club. Orion's apparently having a conniption fit about something. About a cat? The cat opened the cupboard. Orion thought it was a disaster. So we get OT3. The Wall of Fire comes out at the same time as the beginning of the Sea Org. And the OT3 process corresponds with a depressive episode in Elrond's life. And so the story is that the OT3 Wall of Fire was part of this depressive episode. Yeah, I do, Cricket. I sure do. I don't think we're going to get a third Minnesota goodbye, y'all, today. Maybe we will. We will see. It has been awful quiet in here tonight, although I suppose it is Super Bowl Sunday. Is the game still going on? Game's over. Okay. But it is Super Bowl Sunday. Talks about all the difficulties they had being able to leave the ship, dealing with the safety requirements that different countries had. And he had someone fly to, where did they go? They had to fly to Gibraltar. No, not Gibraltar. The Eagles won? Okay, Scooter Mom. That's okay, Antics. I mean, you guys are allowed to listen. That is kind of the whole point. It's just awfully quiet today, that's all. So the Royal Scotsman got turned in Scotsman. Let me find out. Kendrick Lamar, Serena Williams, and Kendrick Lamar. So what else, guys? This has got us through to about, this is an interesting piece in here. You're making poutine, Antics? That sounds lovely for dinner. Tell me how you make it. You make the fries from scratch, or are you using, like, Ore-Ida? Scratch. Nice, Antics. You have a deep fryer, huh? I haven't had French fries homemade from scratch in 50 years. I mean, I've had them in a restaurant, but I don't remember making them at home from scratch, ever. I've never made them. I got them. My parents had a deep fryer when I was a girl, but we've never kept a deep fryer in the house. I don't think I've ever made French fries from scratch. Oven fried French fries I've done. Antics is all scratch. Excellent. Excellent. The fudge I made turned out perfect. And I had some guests, so I am down to not very much. Cheese curds. It has to be cheese curds. You don't deep fry them? Okay, Antics. Do you oven fry them? I've oven fried French fries. I've done that a lot. So, Cricket, what should we do for the 4th Minnesota goodbye? That's okay, Kristen. You're allowed to run your life. You're allowed to run your life. How's kiddo doing? Are they hard to find? I suppose they would be. I mean, they're hard to find here too. They're really easy to find in Minnesota. Everybody uses them in Minnesota. You saw them, so you decided you needed to make poutine. Wonderful. Wonderful. That sounds lovely. Okay, that is what we will do. Here, you guys, here is the 4th Minnesota Goodbye Award. And let me find you, because I just lost you. There you are. And pick a window to share. There it is. You saute them. Oh, you don't oven fry them either. You saute them in some shallow oil. Okay. There's all different kinds of ways to do it. That works just fine, Antics. I like that way too. So here is third Minnesota goodbye, y'all. And if you didn't know, Dusty is selling t-shirts. Does he have a link, Antics? Or not Antics, Cricket? Does he have a link? How is he selling the t-shirts? Do you need to contact him? If you guys want a t-shirt and you don't know, you like that one? If you like this one better than the other one, Scooter Mom, you can have either one you wanted. That's fine with me. If it's fine with Cricket. There's Dusty's shirt sale. Thank you, Cricket. Dusty is making some amazing tie-dye t-shirts. Cricket is the is the money a fundraiser? Is the money going to Dusty? You got it? What'd you get, Antics? I got the impression you're happy with the one you have? Okay, Scooter Mom. It's a post on his community page? Right. Right. And I can't see that post right now because I can't follow the link from Restream to go see it. I'd have to get into my own live on YouTube to be able to do that. Okay, guys. I think that takes us through the creation of the Sea Org, the trip to Rhodesia, the deep racism, the beginnings of ethics cycles, the worship of the tech over everything, the victory of, what was this quote? This was an excellent quote. Let me close with it. Ethics was a victory of, let me find it. We've been doing a lot of letting me find it today, and you guys have just hung out with me. Ethics. Well, I can't find it. And it is time to close. So I will leave you guys with this amazing reminder to take a look at Dusty's page. And I will see all y'all on... Oh, guys! Do you know what yesterday was? Do you guys know what yesterday was? What's too heavy, Antics? You guys, yesterday was my first live stream. A year ago yesterday was my very first live stream. February 8th. February 8th was my 1-year anniversary. So thank you all for spending my anniversary with me. And with that, I will actually say goodbye to all y'all. Catch you on Wednesday.